2, 1. Thank you, everyone, for joining the Corporate Services Committee being held on October 11th, 2022. The attendees for this committee are Gladys Blackmore, which she sends her regrets, myself, Mr. Dylan Bressy, and Mayor Clayton. We have no delegations today, but we have 2 reports, and start off with item 3.1, the Director Service Area Report. Ms. Danielle Waitway, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair O'Toole. So we've had a multi-department project going on for a number of months now. So we've completed our first week of go live on our ERP. So just a bit of background, this was a complex project that took thousands of hours and stretched across most of the entire organization, and has allowed us to go with one system for finance, supply chain management, human capital management, and budgeting, planning, and forecasting. So this, we've had a successful first week with a few minor tweaks that we're working to address. The other significant update I'd like to share today is on by-election. So we've done worker training over the last week and have had 90 workers participate to date. The first advance vote was this past Saturday, October 8th. There will be another on Saturday, October 15th from 11 to 7 at Teresa Sargent Hall at the Montrose Cultural Centre. Election day, of course, is Monday, October 17th from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. with multiple locations available. And that concludes my update for today.
Thank you very much. Was there any questions? I think you got off scot-free, so we'll continue on. Item 3.2 is Bylaw C-1299E, the Procedure Bylaw Amendment. Bylaw C-1323D, and Subdivision Authority Bylaw Amendment. And Leona Hansen was supposed to do this report. She's unable to attend. So we've got CEO, Mr. Bob Nicolay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll back us up just one half step, if I may. And I know Council was very generous in their accolades to our CFO, Danielle, and her entire team. But I really want to point out that the ERP implementation that went live about a week ago today was enormously successful. Knock on wood, it's still getting its rhythms, and will take a while to get all the bugs shaken out. But it was a Herculean effort. My daughter does this for a living on the Gold Coast in Australia, and so I kept her apprised as to what we were doing here. And she offers from Australia her accolades, Danielle, to you and your team. It was an Oracle installation, which is highly complex, but it's the best. I don't want to make a paid advertising here, but it is top drawer equipment systems for a municipality like ours. Takes us into the 21st century, and this community will be very well served by that system for decades to come. So offer my compliments and commendations as well for the entire team. So that was the easy part of my report, Mr. Chairman. The tougher part is I would like to take us through some of the material that was included in your packages on the proposed amendments to 2 bylaws, the procedure bylaw, C-1299E, and secondarily the subdivision authority bylaw, which is C-1323D. Really the essence of the change is found in the procedures bylaw. The subdivision authority bylaw follows on from that. And there are really 4 things, let's say, that we're trying to accomplish in these overall amendments. The first is to align the procedures bylaw to the new organization. So Council directed and management has now implemented a new organizational alignment, or reorg, as it's often referred to, that offers us a better opportunity to align resources strategically and operationally to get work done quickly, minimizing red tape, and getting the organization nimble and able to serve the community. I really do want to thank council for the support in that reorg, and it is well underway now. We're starting to fill key positions. So one of the things that has to align with that, of course, is the procedure bylaw and the subdivision authority bylaw to make sure that it's pointing to the right committees and pointing to the right management organization. So that's the first thing that was trying to be done. Second one was a bit more perhaps substantive, and I'm very interested in council's views on, and that was to remove the opportunity for what are commonly referred to as walk-on delegations to council. They are part of a democratic process that has been part of this community for a very long time. But when a delegation doesn't register in advance, it doesn't give the organization an opportunity to prepare for it. And so what we've witnessed over the years is delegations coming in to speak about something that's on their mind. Management's not prepared, council members are not prepared because they didn't know that it was going to happen. And so the value of that moment is diminished because we haven't got good dialogue back and forth on a prepared basis. The suggestion in these proposed amendments would see a 1-week notice for the delegations to register, which gives us ample opportunity to get ready. So that's the second change. Third change is one that I think most council members probably thought was occurring anyway, but it wasn't, at least according to our bylaw. And that is that the mayor will actually approve the content of the agenda for council meeting in advance before it goes out. Also approving any delegations that may be registering for that as well. Right now it's done de facto by the CLT, so we've got management effectively approving an agenda for council, which we certainly have input into and certainly need to provide the input material into, but before it takes that final step and becomes the official meeting agenda, the chair of that meeting ought to be involved in approving it. So the third amendment looks to changing the approval process so the mayor actually physically approves that. And the final one is really just aligning to practice. So what we did find when the initial look at this bylaw was prompted by the reorg and looking to get things back in line with the new organization. That prompted a more comprehensive view. And what our city clerk did, our manager of legislative services did, was go through and look at the way council currently operates and make sure that that's supported by the procedures bylaw. So those are the 4 changes. They do spill over into the subdivision authority bylaw as well, but essentially intending to serve those 4 objectives. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll open it to any questions.
Sure, thank you very much. Start off with Councillor Bosch and Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Chair O'Toole. My question is, and you probably said it already, but I just want some clarity. On section 4.37 and 7.33, where the amendments allow for parameters in which an extension of time would be allowed during the public hearing or presentation, are you talking about the hearing or the presentation itself when they're here, or are you talking about the week of notice?
Thank you through the chair. And in response, it is the delegation when they're here. So technically, delegations are given a fixed period of time in which to address council, and council needs a mechanism to formally allow that to continue on. Right now, there isn't that process in place, so all this would do is would be to give council the ability to say, we would like to hear more, please carry on, and it freezes that moment so the council can actually make that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you, Chair O'Toole. I do have a number of questions, but I'll just ask around one topic and then get back in the queue. Speaking with public delegations, am I correct in assuming that this new process does not apply to public hearings? So if we're having a public hearing, would somebody still be able to just show up and speak to the public hearing?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, public hearings would still be conducted in accordance with legislative requirements which enable people to show up and speak.
Great, thank you. And was there a reason for the 1 week period why administration felt that the 1 week was the appropriate amount of time? Just could you give me a bit more details about why not longer, why not shorter, why 1 week?
Through the chair, good question. It's not quite arbitrary. It's more based on experience that it allows administration the opportunity to properly prepare. And in the event that they need to brief a committee chair, for example, on something that's coming up so that the committee chair knows, the week seemed like a reasonable period of time.
Great, thank you. I do have questions on other topics, but I'll get in the back of the queue if I may.
Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair O'Toole. I couldn't find it in where, just as you referred to this last piece, is that we have to vote at that particular point, or is it up to the discretion of the chair to extend the time for a delegation?
Leave without going back and reading the precise wording that council has to vote. So if there is going to be an extension, Danielle, am I wrong on that? Thank you.
Through the chair. So the mayor, with their discretion, extends the amounts of time. Council by resolution also. So if requested by a member of council, a vote of council must be taken to approve the extension.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Chair O'Toole. So in these new committees, the 5 areas of business, financial administration is the old corporate services, right? Am I wrong?
Sort of.
Sort of wrong?
Yeah,
Because Invest GP is the old infrastructure and economic.
not quite. The parallels don't quite align that way. So the content is summarized in the bylaw itself, but essentially the old corporate services would have been chief of staff, or what we're now referring to as strategy and communications, and the old finance side of it, so the corporate services side. So chief of staff and chief financial officer would be what you would have historically associated with corporate services. On the infrastructure and economic development, infrastructure is now all under the purview of the chief operating officer. So it would be in the operational service area, and economic development from planning and development and inspection services right through to business attraction and investment attraction would be the chief investment officer.
Okay, it's going to take me a minute, but
Yeah,
I'll get it.
It will, and I do thank you for raising it, because this is a change that will result in a different dynamic around the committee tables. I think our experience as we went through, and this was the organization that we proposed, the reorg we proposed, was a CLT-wide initiative, and it was supported by the entire CLT. What we found is that by partitioning these services into these groupings, we get a much more logical conversation amongst the management team, at least, with the kinds of things that we're trying to achieve in the community. Hoping that it'll be a bit clunky at first while we implement it through the committees if it's supported, but that rhythm should result in a better dialogue going forward.
Mayor Clayton?
Thanks, Chair O'Toole. I think it's just a typo, or unless it was strategic, but the membership for each committee, sometimes it includes the mayor and sometimes it doesn't. I think it was just a typo. You didn't intend to keep the mayor off of certain committees. So,
No.
okay. So just if that could be amended, and whoever chooses to make the motion, the two that are missing, it says 3 members of council, it's missing, and the mayor in operational services and finance and admin.
Thank you, and through the chair, while we're talking about amendments, friendly amendments, there's another one on item 3.7. There's a typo. It says in the even of a by-election, should be in the event of a by-election. So if we can consider that to be a friendly amendment.
Oh, and public and protective is missing the mayor too.
Yeah, the Amanda informed me that is in. It's been fixed.
Oh.
So
It's in the actual bylaw amendment. That marked up copy was just for information.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
a typo in there, but not in the actual.
Thank you.
Okay.
the
Mr.
membership
Mr.
ones, right?
Dylan Bressy.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So, two smaller matters I had, and then I'll have a question about a bigger one. But in section 4.3, it talks about in-camera items and our old MGA requirements, which are reflecting the existing bylaw, where you talked about the general matter of what was going to be discussed and the FOIP title. And I understand that the MGA no longer requires that. But is there what risk is there if council chooses to continue that practice of giving the FOIP section and the very general overview of what we're talking about when we move in camera?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of any risk that would be introduced by that. It was considered to be redundant because it's not required. But if it's an additional piece of information that council would prefer, I don't see any mischief in that.
And then another little one I had was in section 6.18, it talks about recording of minutes. And our current practice is to record the names of members who vote for or against a motion. And if I'm understanding these revisions correctly, we would only record the names if a recorded vote was requested. Do you know why that change is being recommended?
I don't, to be honest, recall discussion on that item. Councillor Bressie, Danielle, do you?
Thank you, through the chair. I think it's, again, not a requirement, and that's, again, probably why the amendment was made.
And I do have one other question, but I don't know if others are in the queue.
Yeah,
Chair.
no, go ahead.
Okay. Then my last question before we start discussing it is just talking around the committees. I'll share my concerns in a bit when we enter debate, but I am concerned about the change to committees. I'm just curious if council did decide to keep its existing 4 committees. How important is it that our committees are aligned with directorships, and how important is it that council structure mirror the administrative structure?
A very good question through the chair. We do want to be careful here that the tail is not wagging the dog. So absolutely, your management team exists to serve council and community. So regardless of how council decides to interact with us, we'll adjust to how that should be. So the management organization is what I am responsible for, and so we've organized that into groupings that work from a management perspective. If council decided that they weren't going to have committees at all, or they were going to configure the committees in entirely different organization, we would simply adjust to that. So it's not critical at all. The value of doing it from my perspective is that it allows relationships to form between, for example, committee chairs and directors or chiefs, that allows them to get on a rhythm with each other and make sure that the needs of the committee are being served. It can be a bit clunky if there are 2 different directors having to serve each committee. So that was the basis for trying to do it, but it wouldn't be fatal if council didn't want to do it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Bosch and then Councillor Thiessen. You're done? Okay. Councillor Thiessen, you're next in the queue.
Thank you very much. I'm just looking for a little bit of clarity here. So going through it all, I had a little flag and then I forgot it and then I remembered it as I was scrolling through. The protocol for agenda items. So I know Councillor Bosch asked a question earlier if people would have their opportunity to speak or whatnot. I noticed that in item 6.17 that was taken off. So when a developer has a development and comes in and speaks to that, and then people who are for it or against it come and speak to that, that's all part of our agenda process. But I was just a little confused as to why it was X'd out in 6.17. So I guess my question is for the protocol of agenda items, are we still going to have that delegation, presentation, submission for or against conversation in the course of the meeting, or are we just skipping that altogether?
Through the chair, no, it would still be, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. This is just for standing committee items where we don't typically allow the delegations to speak during the item. We have them register to speak ahead, so that's why it's eliminated from that section.
Okay, good. Yeah, that was the clarity I was looking for. Thank you very much.
All right. Is there any other questions? Looking for business. Go ahead.
Great. If the chair will permit, just since we're less formal in committee, I don't want to make a motion yet, but I was hoping to have some conversation about this committee change, and just before I make any motions or somebody else makes motions, hoping to share some of my concerns with the committee change in terms of. Councillor Blackmore's talked about this a lot, and I really share her sentiments. We've got this really awkward, clunky thing right now where we've got these 4 standing committees that are kind of acting like committee of the whole, but only 4 of us can vote. And for me, I really think there's awkwardness in kind of having standing committees that are kind of committee of the whole operating at the same time. And for me personally, I think that if we're going to keep on maintaining standing committees where not all members vote, we should start treating those standing committees more like actual committees where most of us tend to butt out of what's being talked about in that conversation unless it's really burning with us that we're involved in that, and where we really trust the members of those committees, and particularly the chair of that committee, to be our council expert on that when the mayor's not available to speak to it. And I think we either should go in that direction, or we should get rid of standing committees and just operate as council committee of a whole for most things, which a lot of councils do choose to do. And I'm kind of agnostic which one's best, but I don't like this hybrid model. And for me, going to 5 committees, I think actually makes the problem worse. I think that for me, when we've got 5 committees, that means we're breaking our rhythm of our existing chairs, our existing committee members. That means that it gets even more complicated when a matter of conversation comes up to go, oh yeah, what committee does that belong to again? That means that if we're going to start focusing more on committee work, there's less to do on each committee, which makes a councillor who's only on one committee, their portfolio just shrinks a little bit. And I just don't think that going to more committees furthers the work of council. I really get why it's being done administratively. I really get the organizational changes. I get some of those conveniences of why us aligning with the administration would work well. But from a governance perspective, I just don't think we have healthy governance around our committees right now. And I think that this makes it more difficult to find a model that I think would be more efficient and better. And so that's kind of my thoughts on it. I'm just curious if others have any ideas or thoughts on future of our committee structure.
Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair O'Toole. I agree. Our standing committees in this hybrid model aren't ideal. So I think it would alleviate some of your concerns if we operated standing committees as standing committees. I'm not opposed to the committee of the whole conversation. It's not how we've done it in the past, right? I just think for me, knowing that there is 5 chiefs in 5 identified buckets of work, that it makes sense that a standing committee aligns to a chief. You know, for example, if you take economic development and infrastructure apart, you keep them as is, there's 2 directors that are there now. It's not efficient, in my opinion, in management's execution, because a councillor is going to a director for, they'll have to go to 2 directors, whereas it's really clearly identified this director is economic development, this director is everything in the ground, this director. I just think that it really aligns well with the director that's associated to the bucket. It's clearly identified. I see your concern in regards to, now there's 5 standing committees. Is it even more council committee of the whole? I think that as an organization, as a team, that if we run our standing committees and the chairs of those standing committees run them appropriately, it doesn't mean councillors that aren't on the committees can't come, but the expectation is that they're there to listen. If their question doesn't get answered, maybe the chair if time allows them an opportunity to ask questions. But there's a lot of input right now from non-members, and that's something that is sort of our housekeeping responsibility. So if we're going to stick to the standing committee process, the chairs need to be more firm on that expectation that, I'm sorry, Councillor so-and-so, but you're not on the committee, and the intent is for you to be here to observe. So I think that will alleviate a lot of it. I just think internally, and change is always difficult, and you talked about the rhythm, and I get that. It's a little disruptive. Unfortunately, we're going through a by-election, which is also disruptive. So I think that it's the perfect timing for the change. the new council, as it may be, will get aligned to the new priorities based on the leadership of each bucket of work that happens, and we'll just change it. I know that Councillor Thiessen and I, and O'Toole, we had a change in our first term. There had been, different committees, and it was a change, and it took the returning councillors a while to adjust. And for us, it was new; it didn't matter. But we just need to treat that after October 17th, we are a new council, and we'll have new operations. So I think that it's just more seamless in regards to efficiencies. Once you see, the buckets of what work's happening in infrastructure, what work's happening in Invest GP, what work's happening in operational services, then you'll just get used to it. And I think that it makes more sense. It's more seamless for the management of the organization, and as elected officials, we can adapt. Just my thoughts. Thanks.
And I can tell you, when I first got elected in 2010, you would come to the committee meetings, and if you weren't on there, you were invited to come, but you just observed. And if you had a question, you reached over and you asked somebody if they would ask that question for you. It was shorter meetings because it wasn't a lot of discussion from everybody. There was the key members of that committee. And if it was something that you really wanted to talk about and didn't get asked, there was our council meeting. Every council's been different for me. This last term, it seemed like a free-for-all. Anybody can ask any question at any given time. And that's sort of the pace that we've taken. And I've said it before, I didn't really like that, because somebody that's on that committee wants to read that report and wants to ask a number of questions. And because you're not the first one to ask, everybody's asked your questions, and you're not the voting members, So I'm open to change. There's nothing wrong with any of those positions or situations. It's just that we have to be open. And I think this is a good step forward. Thank you. And he was first. He just told me that. So, Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you, and I appreciate your comments, Councillor O'Toole, but I'm also in agreement of Councillor Bressy, and I'm also in agreement with CAO Nikolai. So my only request is that we get a chance to at least discuss off camera and figure out what's that look like, because there is some angst. I come along and all of a sudden my committee's different. So I don't want that angst. I just want to make sure if this is the change that we need to have, then that's the direction you want us to go. We're going to go in that direction. But I just need, thank you.
Chair,
Mayor Clayton,
I
go ahead.
just want council to recognize that annually at our organizational meeting, the mayor can change any committee. So although you're comfortable in a bucket you're in right now, that very well could change in a couple of weeks regardless. So just need to be nimble in the sense that annually committees can change. So.
And the reason that is so every councillor gets their foot wet on every opportunity to know a little bit more. And I think that's a good thing. Councillor Bosch and Councillor Thiessen and Councillor Bressy.
Thank you, Chair O'Toole. I completely agree with the 5 clearly identified buckets. I think that makes total sense when you're dealing with the chief who runs each of those buckets. As far as committee of the whole versus committee members only, I struggle with that because I think it just will drag on. Everything will get dragged on, in my opinion, and meaning that the members of the committee will have their opportunity and the other councillors will not. And then that'll get dragged on to the council meeting. Or it'll get dragged on to administration when a councillor, I have a thought about this, and then administration has to go off and do some work. So I'm more of a proponent to get it all out. I think we can all get along as far as asking questions and putting input in. It gives administration a heads up clearly, and it sets us up for a council meeting that is seemingly more organized, in my opinion. So I prefer the comments from everyone. I think we're all in this together. You know, it's cliche, I know, but you know, it is my thought process.
Okay, we differ, but anyhow. Mayor Clayton.
Sorry, I just have a question for Councillor Bosch. Then are you advocating for standing committees that have a better structure, or are you advocating for committee of the whole?
Well, I guess I'm just learning about this, but I guess for me, a committee of the whole, I think would clean up a lot of details prior to making motions at council. If you get all the questions out of the way, if you need to split it in days, that's fine. But I think everybody on this council has, some sort of knowledge and background that can assist with making decisions. And if you leave that to the day of council meeting, okay, you'll have a list of questions from a whole bunch of councillors, and it'll just drag on, whether it's through administration or discussion at council. I think we're going to take the time at some point, either way. So where do we want to take that time?
If I may, I think the concern of council committee of the whole is your council meetings become truly rubber stamping meetings. All the work gets done at committee of the whole, and then the public traditionally doesn't watch committee meetings. I mean, they're recorded it's a convenience that we do this. It's a service we offer. Many councils don't record committee meetings. We've only just started this. And then in my opinion, council meetings become rubber stamping because you've had the discussion. I think that I personally prefer the standing committee process because that is the filter to make sure that the work administration is bringing forward has what it needs to go to council for a more full discussion. So.
Okay, fair enough.
And I'll just share one thing. You can come to any county standing committee. Yeah, well, we'll work on that. Duct tape does wonders. Councillor Thiessen.
Well, this is for Councillor Bosch because I sent her lots of notes like throughout every single meeting. Like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Just for points of thoughts and observation. But I think what the mayor's articulated here, I'm very much in agreement of. Just 3 terms in now, I find that our standing committee days tend to draw out and they go longer, and most of our administration is actually going past lunch, sometimes council past lunch, and we are having good, fulsome discussion. But the last point I put down here, I pointed when Mayor Clayton said rubber stamping, that was the last point that I had. But I wrote a bunch of things here. So time management is better. It's better for our staff. It's better for council. As Mayor Clayton said, it works as a good filter to go through. Chair management, I mean, I probably let people go on longer than most chairs, like when they're talking, discussing, or debating, especially as a delegation. But I mean, we have a role as chair to try to, get to the point as quickly as possible and have a good, thorough discussion through that process, right? Sometimes we drag on the same points and everyone throws in an opinion. And next thing you know, one item just took 20 minutes longer because we're all sitting around here. I don't think there's anything wrong with observing. All administration still in the room at the same time. So if you had a question that you needed to ask, you could always go tap a director on the shoulder after the meeting and say, hey, this didn't get asked, and go from there. And just as an example, 2 seats down from me, Councillor Bressie, on his first term, he came in with extraordinary knowledge even before he was elected on his website. That was all observational learning. He didn't ask those questions like the council got to ask. He observed some of the questions that they asked. He had his own, and he presented it in a forum where he thought he could address the public before being elected. So I think there are lots of opportunities, and sometimes we learn and understand more when we're not thinking about what to say next. And I really want our council meetings to be that thing that people come to. If there's an item on the agenda, they want to have a say on it. I don't want to have to tell them, well, we already discussed that. It's a moot point now, but go back to this committee meeting date, a month ago, as was the case between Alberta municipalities and our council meetings, right? So I'm all for these changes. I just wanted to make sure that our public and people on agenda items could make sure that they could address those, and obviously not standing committees. But I like this, and I'm not against it. I think the old way may be the best way, and I just encourage a bit more chair management and mindfulness. Write down your questions that you never got asked and bring them to the table. It makes council more exciting. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm really appreciating the conversation. I think just a little bit of history that's worth sharing for those that weren't here before is I think really where we got into this messy, it's part standing committee, part committee of the whole, was because it used to be committee meetings were every Tuesday, and half of them happened one Tuesday, half of them happened the other Tuesday, and you often didn't have all members of council at every meeting because you were doing other things for work, and then we put them all on one morning, and now Tuesday's committee meeting day, so I'm not going to schedule other work for Tuesday, so I may as well come from them all. So if we're going to keep sending committees, maybe we want to look at a schedule where we're just not doing them all together, so we don't just all show up to them. I think two thoughts. I think if we went to committee of the whole, that rubber stamping is a concern, but I think that's just something where we'd have to treat that regular committee of the whole different than our existing committee of the whole, where right now, committee of the whole are for budget. They're for very special things where we really are debating at that committee of the whole. I know most councils, I've watched councils that operate with committee of the whole structure, and what they're usually pretty disciplined to do from the chair at their regularly scheduled committee of the wholes is we just don't debate there. That really is a time to receive reports, ask information, but the debate itself is saved for the actual council meeting so that you go in and the public really can see how their public officials are thinking about things and how their public officials are debating each other, but they don't necessarily have to sit through, sorry, administration, but boring administrative reports to hear that debate. I actually think it can make it more transparent and easier for the public to see council's decision-making process if chaired properly. It definitely would have to be different than we've done in the past. So there's merit to either model. I think my main concern, though, is going from 4 committees to 5 committees, if we stick with the standing committee model, is we don't work in this full time. And I get why administration who are working much more than full time, I'm sure, in managing the city, had to split their bucks up to 5 manageable pieces. My concern is if we do go to a model and we start saying, hey, council, we want to start treating standing committees more as standing committees, well, there already isn't a huge amount of work with some of these committees. And I want all elected officials to feel that I want their conversations to be coherent and to be robust and full at these committee meetings. And I'm scared that if the work gets even more fragmented, it makes it harder for one committee to have enough work to really chew in as a committee. I really feel for doing the math. There'd be one counselor who only gets appointed to one committee, and I feel kind of bad for that counselor, depending on what committee they get. So I just do. I'd personally like, if we're going to stay with standing committees, treat them really as standing committees, give them substantial work, and I'm worried that this model might not support that.
Mayor Clayton.
Yeah, Councillor Bressie, I appreciate your concerns. Right now, though, there's more than one that only get one committee. So, with a new model, there's better chance for councillors to have input at committee level because everybody but one would get 2, and right now 4 people only get 1. So, I think that I agree that something for consideration could be splitting into 2 weeks, but I would say, and I'll ask a CAO or somebody, if council endorses this, we go through it and we're finding that committee meetings, having 5 different groups is taking longer. Could we split it into weekly committee meetings on Tuesdays at that point, or can that only be done at an organizational sort of meeting annually?
Through the chair, really good question, and I think it will be important. If council does support this, it'll be important for the rhythm of this council to start to set in and to determine how management interacts with you. We're looking to you routinely for political leadership and community leadership, and because of the nature of the role, we also bridge into operational activities. Inevitably, we talk about how things actually operate. So I really do encourage that the rhythm of this council be reflected in how we conduct these kinds of meetings. We would certainly be able to split into multiple days if that's a preference. And even the discussion about whether standing committee or council committee of the whole is better for this community and this council should be ongoing. This council, it should be a living process for you. What makes sense today may not make sense 3 months from now or 6 months from now. And you should feel quite at liberty to adjust. My appeal would be to support this so that the organizational meeting can occur and we can get alignment between the chiefs and their respective committee chairs, but to keep going on the evolution of the governance model that suits you best, and your management team will adjust to it.
If I can, Chair O'Toole, I think that to your other point, Councillor Bressy, of regards of sometimes there's not a lot of work done, I do believe there's not a lot of work for councillors at committee level, sorry. I believe that if, let's give this a go, let's give it a try. I know that management cancels meetings when it doesn't seem appropriate. If there's one item and it's not time sensitive, it will get moved to another standing committee scheduled day. But I think this also gives council an opportunity to really dive into very specific things, right? So if you are in a protective services, public and protective services committee, now you really know where your focus is, where there are right now some buckets that are significant. Although infrastructure and economic development makes sense, they go hand in hand, they are truly different things. And so if you're on IED right now and you get put on economic development or you get put on infrastructure, you really can focus on specific things. And as I mentioned before, more councillors will have an opportunity to be on more committees, with there being 5. So, and more chairs, yeah. And a council committee of the whole, nobody gets the chance to chair. It's all me. So, Councillor Bressy, sorry, go ahead, Councillor O'Toole.
It's all about you, right? No, Councillor Bressy, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair O'Toole. And I really hear that last point, Mayor Clayton. I think if we move to committee of the whole, what I'd suggest is deputy mayor chairs regularly scheduled committee of the whole. So you still do the special ones like budget, but deputy chair does the regular ones. Because I think it's important for you to be able to make motions and be more assertive than you can as chair. So I really hear you there. Maybe Chair O'Toole, I'll try a motion that can advance this conversation in the future without us. I also hear the need to pass this bylaw today, so we know where we're going with, or sorry, to send this bylaw to council today, so we know we're going in the org meeting. So, I'd move that committee direct administration to return a report with an alternate committee schedule for consideration and a survey of Alberta mid-sized cities outlining which ones are operating as a standing committee structure and which ones are operating as a committee of the whole structure. And just to speak to this, I think this is a conversation that we should continue to have. We're just in an awkward place where the role of councillor is becoming more and more full-time and more part-time, and we're getting busier. And I think as we get busier, we need to have this conversation about what is the best way to govern ourselves. And so I think that this information of having information to look at what would a different way of scheduling our standing committees so they can operate more as standing committees and not as a weird sort of committee of the whole would be one good way to have that conversation. Also, I just honestly I know of a couple municipalities that are operating as committees of the whole, but I don't know what all of them are doing. And if we see, hey, every mid-sized city's chosen to do standing committees or a bunch are doing committee of the whole, that'll have me changing my mind. And just to speak to that survey of mid-sized cities, I'm not being specific in that and saying every mid-sized city or anything like that. I trust management to go and pick a sample size that they feel is appropriate and do an appropriate scope of work of there. So I just want some information for consideration.
Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair O'Toole. Yeah, I'm happy to support this motion. I think it's valuable information. I can support administration on getting input from the mid-sized city mayors. We meet again here in a few weeks, and I can get a pretty good sample from there. I guess the other thing I encourage councillors who chair standing committees to be mindful of time and remind yourselves that the expectation is that you're not here. You don't have to be here if you're not on a standing committee. That's always been our rule. We've just sort of different iterations of different councils, and different councillors have different allowable time. Some people choose to come to everything and some don't. But there was never an expectation from councillors who aren't on a specific standing committee that they had to be here. So just two things. We can be cognizant of that time as well. But happy to support that that motion just to get that information for future discussion. Thanks. And just to be clear, Councillor Bressy, this is in your your intent isn't to impact this year's organizational committee meeting.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe we do something mid-year, but yeah, this isn't, hey, I'm not supporting this bylaw until we get this information. This is
Perfect.
pass this bylaw, then get this information later.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there's a motion on the table. Any discussion? See none. I call for the vote.
Mayor Clayton in favor.
And that passes unanimously. All right. Who wants to take up the rest of the business?
Happy to take the other items, Chair.
Please do.
Committee recommend council give 3 readings to bylaw C-1299E, being an amendment to the procedure bylaw.
Thank you. That's in order. Any discussion? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair O'Toole. I've got a few amendments I'd like to move to it. And first of all, I would move that committee direct administration to amend the recommended bylaw revisions to leave section 430 as currently written. And just speak this, 430 is the in-camera section. It's talking about just listing basic information about what are we talking about in the FOIP section. There, I think for me, residents see in camera and they don't understand what that is. They think sometimes that we're meeting camera just because it's politically awkward to talk about something, where the reality is when we move in camera, it's because we have a legal responsibility to move in camera. There's information that we legally can't discuss publicly, such as things that would hurt a third party because it's their private information. And I think it's just good practice to have it on the minutes so residents can see why we're moving in camera.
Do you want to do all your amendments?
I'm going to have some that I don't know will get supported by committee, so maybe I should do them separately.
Okay. How do you want to do this then?
Vote on the amendment.
Okay. Go back to the question. Call for the vote
On the amendment.
on the event.
Councillor Bressy in favor.
Passes unanimously. Right. Mr. Bressy.
I would move that committee amend the recommended bylaw revisions to leave section 617C as reading, the names of the members voting either for or against all motions. Just speak to this. I think that it is good practice that you can see who supported, who didn't support a motion. I don't want to have to ask for a recorded vote every time I think something will be controversial and I want my vote recorded.
Go ahead, Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair O'Toole. Yeah, I'm happy to support this. It doesn't matter either way to me. People could find it on video. It's a time-saving mechanism for residents who are interested and who supported something, because they truly could go to the video and watch it and figure it out themselves. So I don't think that there's any harm in this, and it's probably actually easier than the other way on many levels. So happy to support it.
Perfect. Okay, if there's any other discussion, I see none. Call for the vote on the amendment. And that passes unanimously. Mr. Bressy?
Great, thank you. And here's where I start getting more controversial. Speaking about public delegation people being able to come, I personally think at council I'll be arguing, hey, we should leave that open delegation there, but I don't think that'll be supported by all of council. I think the role of committee is more to get something that will be amenable to council to discuss. So I'll probably save that kind of nuclear motion for council itself. But I am hoping to get this bylaw to something that would be more palatable to me and hopefully other members too. And I really am concerned about, well, I'll make the motion first. I would move that committee amend the recommended bylaw revisions to require a delegate to register no later than 10 a.m. the day of the scheduled meeting. And just speak to this, I get why we want to move away from open walk-on delegations. I really do, and there's part of me that supports that. But a week before council meeting is just too long to me. That means that if I decide I want to speak to council the day after, or sorry, I guess 6 days before a council meeting, then I'm spending 20 days before I can come speak to council. And that's just too long a time loop for me to require residents to know 20 days ahead they want to speak to us. Yeah, so so for me it would be, because committee starts before 10 a.m. So then if I could do a friendly amendment, I'd say 10 a.m. the day of scheduled council meetings, and 10 a.m. the business day prior to committee meetings.
Clayton?
Thanks, Chair O'Toole. I just wonder, Councillor Bressy, if you consider a friendly amendment and keeping it that both be a business day prior. I think that I agree a week is a lot. I just think, if 10 a.m. the day of a council meeting, lots happens on a council day with administration and with the mayor, and if we could just have one sort of rule that it's one full business day prior. So if it's the Monday, and it'd be noon a business day prior. So it's Friday by noon or Monday by noon.
That was going to be the amendment I make if this one failed, and reading the room, knowing that I need to get both your votes. Sure, I'll welcome that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. Okay, is there any discussion on that amendment? I see none. Call for the vote. Still stops people from coming in night of or day of.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. How many more you got?
I got two, one for sure. I think just one more.
Okay.
Maybe
Councillor Bressy, please go ahead with your amendments.
to amend the recommended bylaw revisions to allow delegates to register no later than 12 p.m. the day of a scheduled council meeting if their presentation is relevant to an item on the agenda. And just to speak to this, I do think that our agendas often don't get published till Friday afternoon. So literally, if the way that we've got it written right now, them having to be scheduled by 12 p.m. the day before, if somebody sees somebody on our council agenda and they want to speak to it, they'd have no way to actually come and speak to it. So I understand the need of wanting more time for administration to be prepared and for council to know what's coming. But presumably, if a member of the public speaking something that's on our agenda, we'd be prepared to receive them. And I think people should have that right. See something on our agenda and say, I want to come in at the beginning of the meeting and speak to this.
Fair enough. Mayor Clayton?
Thanks, Chair O'Toole. I got kicked out of eScribe, so can you maybe read what you have there?
Thank you. Through the chair, committee amend the bylaw to allow delegates to register no later than 12 p.m. the day of a scheduled council meeting if their item is a topic of discussion on the agenda for that meeting.
So, question for Councillor Bressy. Tell me what you foresee that isn't happening currently. What are you thinking that something that's been discussed at committee level, now somebody can just come and say, hey, by the way, I want to talk about your urban tree strategy?
No, what my intent of this is if something is on our council meeting for that day,
Yeah.
and somebody wants to speak about something that we're
So
speaking about
I'm
that
being
day.
specific to that. So today we talked about urban tree strategy. If
right.
it wasn't going to budget deliberation, say it was going to next week's council meeting, they can come talk about that?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so I can't support this motion. I think that it will derail work that has been done with significant opportunity for input from the public. I think that we are very fair in delegations. People are allowed to come speak to councillors. Our community reaches out to council individually quite often and through emails. To think that a public member could come, change the conversation and the sentiment on the day of on a motion that could get considered that day is too short of a window. And I'll give you an example. If an urban strategy discussion was going to council next week, somebody comes and says, you know what? I don't want more trees in this city. I want more rose bushes. And they find 5 councillors that say, you know what? I like roses. Well, now we're planting roses, and it all happened at that council meeting. It's just not enough time prep for me. I think that if people want to talk about items that are going to council, there's ways to do that. Council then, in turn, can give administration heads up. Hey, by the way, I'm not going to support this. I'm thinking we need more rose bushes. Then let's have that. But I just really think it makes the meeting less structured, and it becomes a town hall and not a council meeting.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess in response to that, in terms of, I don't see that happening right now, and it's not like we're giving people, we're still making it harder to speak to council than we are right now. So if we're not having that happen right now, I don't see why being more restrictive would make that happen more. And to go to the hypothetical example, say we, as was said earlier in this meeting, there are a lot of members of the public who they pay attention to council meetings. They don't really pay attention to committee meetings. Well, say we were sending urban forestry to council next Monday. Under the proposed revisions as it stands to the procedure bylaw, somebody wouldn't have, if they're not paying attention to the committee agendas, they would have no idea the council's talking about this. It goes to committee on Monday, and they don't see that it's on the council agenda till Saturday or Sunday. They say, "Oh, I have a thought about that. I want to say something about that. I've got a piece of information council should consider." They literally have no ability to come to a meeting and share that before we discuss it. And I don't think people take advantage of that ability a lot now. I don't think we're going to have a floodgate of people doing it, but I still think that people should have a right to have that ability to do that. And frankly, if 5 councillors are saying, "Hey, we're going to dramatically change our strategy," instead of saying, "Hey, we're going to take a step back and we're going to consider more," that'd be shame on those 5 councillors, not shame on that public member that came here.
Well, if it helps the conversation, I'm okay with the way it is right now.
Throw O'Toole the way it is right now, as in you're not going to support any of these amendments?
No, I'm okay with our meetings are at 3 o'clock and people can walk on at that time. That's an opportunity.
Not if you support the motions here today.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. They've already been voted on. That's okay. Well, yep. No. Yeah, so, sorry, Chair O'Toole. With that explanation, Councillor Bressie, I'm more comfortable with it. We can always change it. It's hard to take something back, though, once you give it to people, definitely, because there isn't an opportunity for people. And I just want committee to be clear on the intent of these changes. In my opinion, right now, there are times that we have blind spots when people show up to speak to council, that the mayor and administration are not clear of why they're here. And I think that absolutely, come and speak to council. We want you to have an opportunity to speak to us. But for us to be ill-prepared or the mayor not to understand who's in the chambers and why, it's concerning. So I think your amendment to allow people to come speak to a topic on the agenda is fair. I'm happy to support this at committee. I think that this will, there are opportunities. We've talked about the fact that if there's somebody in the chambers and we don't know why, a director can ask them, "Hey, just out of curiosity, are you looking to speak to council tonight, or are you just here to observe?" And then the mayor can be made aware of that in regards to, you know what, we're talking about that tonight, so yes, let's add agenda. I know that you'd prefer to see it documented with a true procedure. I'm happy to support this at committee level, and we can discuss further at council.
Any other questions, concerns? We can call for the vote. Three for 3, buddy. All right. Main motion. And call for the vote on that. with the amendments? That passes unanimously. Mayor Clayton, did you want to finish the other one off?
Give 3 readings to bylaw C-1323D, being an amendment to the subdivision authority bylaw. Thank you.
Questions, concerns? We'll move on with the vote. And that passes unanimously. We have no items of correspondence. We have no other business. We have no bylaw and policy review. The outstanding items list is empty. That's a good committee, getting our business done. I call this meeting over.